Thoth was, when Thoth first came to me, he first appeared to me, I believe it was in 1972. And the angels had come to me and they had given me his, well, they didn't give me his name. They gave me the name of this guy named Wilt Chipman, who was a Canadian in British Columbia, and told me I was to go there. And I studied alchemy with him for 2 years. And he was really doing it. Though he wasn't sure himself that he was really doing it. He really was. He figured out how to turn mercury into gold, which is just, the process itself is not as important, but the understanding of how it does that. So you can apply it from this level. It's really the process of how this level of consciousness goes into Christ consciousness. And by understanding how mercury goes into gold, or lead into gold, you can understand how that takes place on a human level. The truth is that alchemy is not just that, though it's been centered on that. All chemical levels whatsoever, and all chemical reactions have their counterparts in human experience. Though alchemy is pretty much focused on this one step, because it's the most important one for us at this time. I studied this with him for 2 years. He had a little house like a little ordinary house in Burnaby, Canada. And I don't know if I've ever said this before, but I'll say it. And up in this room, he had this bubble machine, this machine filled with this liquid, and mercury would rise in there, and as it would change different colors. And when it got to the top, it would turn to solid gold and sink back down. So he had these little bubbles coming up and turning into gold, and they'd collect a whole bunch of gold down there. And every day he'd collect these things up. And he built this chemistry lab downstairs. So you would go into this house, like an ordinary house, and you go into this closet, and you go down this elevator into this incredible space age downstairs. But he'd spent millions of dollars on building this place hidden from the rest of the world. And it was huge. It was about the size of this whole room in here, filled with everything you can think of, electron balances, everything that you could ever need or want. And anyway, I was studying alchemy with him, and about 2 years down the line, one day, pretty far down the line, we were in Nelson, British Columbia, and he wanted to teach me a particular meditation, and so I sat down and learned this meditation. It was an open night meditation where we were looking into each other's eyes. And as I started doing this meditation, we did it for about an hour or two. I don't know how long it was in time, but it was a long time. We're staring, and the room had gone away and everything. All there was just sort of his eyes I was looking at. When suddenly something happened that never happened before, and he just disappeared. And at first I thought it was just a phenomenal effect of my eyes, watching this guy's eyes for so long. And he was gone for a long time, and finally I reached over and I kind of went like this, and there was nobody there, he was just gone. And it's like, wow. And, but this time my concentration was back in the room. I was really looking on the spot, and there was nobody there. And after a few minutes, this person reappeared there, just appeared. And only it wasn't him, it was somebody else. Totally different, it wasn't even close. And he was about 35 years old. This guy was maybe 65 or 70 years old. And he wasn't Anglo white type. He was dark-skinned. And he looked very Egyptian. And he was not very tall, maybe 5'3" or 4. And he was clean-shaven, but with a long beard that was tied in 5 places and down off his chin. Real thick, tied down. And he wore very simple long-sleeve pants and shirts that looked like they were made out of cotton. Real simple clothing. And the thing that got me about this person that just grabbed my heart was his eyes. He didn't have anything going on. Everybody's got stuff going on, so it's kind of hard to look at some people's eyes because there's more stuff going on. Other people, if you look into their aura, you see more and more stuff. But when he never anything. It was like it was just like looking into the eyes of a baby. If you ever look in babies' eyes, you look in there, it's okay to look down in there, it's really okay. And that's just how he was. And I never ever met an adult like that before. Not even any of my teachers, nobody. I'd never seen that before. And I was really impressed with that. And he told me that there were 3 atoms missing in the universe, and wanted to know if I knew where they were. Well, I don't really know. And so he gave me a very interesting experience, which I'm not going to talk about here, but when I got back from that experience, I understood what he meant. And I said, okay, I understand. I told him what I had learned, and he just smiled and bowed at me and disappeared again, and a few minutes later, Alpha's teacher came back. And I never knew who that guy was. I was studying with 5 different teachers at that time, and 4 other ones besides Will. And so when the angels who were coming in 2 and 3 times a day at that point, I never asked them who he was, and time went by, and I didn't do it initially, and so as time went by, I just kind of let it go, and he never came up again, and months went by, and then years went by, until finally it was 12 years went by, and one day, 12 years later, he reappeared, and my life changed dramatically. That was on November 1st of 1984, and which I will tell the story at the right time about what happened when we came back in. Okay, Philip came in, and back in, again, he was gone for 12 years. He came back in 1984, in November 1st. And over a period of several months, he began to teach me or instruct me in sacred geometry. I had been instructed from the angels from the very, very first. It was the angels who actually gave me the breathing that we're teaching here. And they taught me a great deal of the sacred geometry. But when he came in, he says, okay, I want to see what you got. And I just gave it to him, and it's like a little ball of white. And he looked at the whole thing and told me that I was missing a whole lot. And so he sat me down every day for several months. He would come into the room, sit down with me on a pillow, and have me make drawings. And I did this for day after day after day after day after day. And after a long period of time, I came up with this drawing here, which was the end result of maybe 3 months of work or something. Of course, this is after I was in I'd already been working for 12 years, and then I came up with this one. And when he got done, he said this was a very special sacred geometry drawing. It was one of the most important ones. It was the first chromosome in the human body. Each of your chromosomes are actually geometrical patterns. And in the geometry of the patterns, which you'll understand this when you get done here, in the very geometry of the chromosome is contained the instructions on how not to just make the human body, but the entire reality. Everything. Including the quasars and the planets and galaxies and everything. And the plants, all the other life forms, not just human, everything's all in there. Only there are certain levels that are missing. There are certain aspects that are missing. The first time that consciousness is self-aware, which we talked about as the Australians, they have 42 plus 2 chromosomes. When it jumps up one more, we gain 2 chromosomes, and we go to 44 plus 2 is what we have. When we go to Christ consciousness, we'll gain 2 more chromosomes and go to 46 plus 2. And then there will be this state further down the line where we will go to 48 plus 2, and then finally the 5th state that we pass through these 5 states, will come to 50 plus 2, 52. And by the way, when I first put this out, which was over 7.5 years ago, there was no scientific proof whatsoever that what I was saying had any basis in biology at all until in the last couple of years. someone tested the Aboriginals in Australia. Nobody's ever done it, I guess. Nobody ever figured out and found out that they all have 42 plus 2 chromosomes. They don't have 44 plus 2 like us. And since then, they found a couple tribes in Africa, I understand, that also have the 44 plus 2. Got many different names all around the world and in various places of the universe, but the one that he called it was the flower of life. Though it's also been called the language of silence and the language of light. Because it is a language, as you're about to see, and it's a language that's hidden underneath, like the words that I'm saying right here. A statement that was pretty outrageous from normal ways of thinking. He says, everything is in here. All the laws of physics, all structure, all crystal structure, all biological life forms in the very shape of every little detail in their bodies, all planetary bodies, all atomic structure, everything, the entire reality, everything that created it was in this one single image. And it sounds like a pretty powerful statement until you really begin to see how this works, and at which point you'll begin to at least get a feel for that may be true. When he got done teaching all this, he then told me that I would find this image in Egypt. And there was 2 times when I doubted him. And I doubted him on that one because I thought I had read just about everything there was in Egypt, and that did not look like an Egyptian symbol to me. It looked more Christian or something, but it did not look Egyptian. And he just said, "You'll find it in Egypt," and left. And since then, by the way, we found it all over the world, just about everywhere. You'll see at the very end of this, you'll see some of the places that we found it in, but almost everywhere. And, 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in Taos, New Mexico, in Smith's food store, buying some groceries, and Katrina Raphael, this friend of mine who writes books on crystals, was in there. And I had taken her to Egypt the first time she went, and she had just come back from Egypt the second time. And she's a woman who takes a camera and just starts, loading it up, and she takes pictures. And she was sitting there at the counter, taking 36 out at a time and put them on a stack, and she had a stack of pictures a good 12 inches high or so. She was still stacking them up when I came up to her. And we started talking and saying hello, how you doing, and that kind of stuff. And she said she just got back from Egypt. And then she says, oh, by the way, she says she has an angel that has guided her into writing the books that she wrote and gave her the information that she wrote. It told her how to get the information through the crystals that she wrote. And I believe that angel's name is Sorrel, I think. But anyway, she said that Sorrel told her when she was in Egypt that she was to give me a photograph as soon as she saw me. And I said, oh, okay, give me the photograph. And she goes, well, I don't know which one it is. So she turns around away from the things, goes to him and pulls one out at random and hands it to me. And when she did, she handed me this photograph, which was the flower of life on one of the oldest walls in Egypt. That wall's about 6,000 years old. And she didn't know, at that time, she didn't know what I was doing. She had no idea. That thing didn't mean a thing to her at all. But to me, it was like wow. If you could pick one photograph in the world, that one, you got me pretty good on that one. And later, I went to that place. I went back again. I had to go there once I found out it was there. I had to go find out what was there. And I went back again, and where that was located, this is in Abydos here. And this is from the Dog Star here. Which is serious. And behind, this is Seti, the first temple in Abydos, and behind that, there's actually 3 temples. There's a Seti, the first temple goes like this. There's 3 temples. This is where we're looking right at, like this right now. And there's a real ancient, one of the oldest temples in all of Egypt sits back here. It's called the Osirian. It's where Osiris supposedly was put back together. If you know that story where he was cut into 14 pieces. And this was like a really holy place to the ancient Egyptians. It was so holy that many of the kings in the olden days didn't have like Zorser, for example, who was Min, the same person. That he didn't bury himself in Saqqara, which is he had himself buried here. And a lot of the old kings did that. Even though they built these huge things that would look like us where they would do it, they had themselves buried here or around here. Well, so Seti the First was building this because of this. And as he was building back in here, there was a little hill here. And as he was building into here, he discovered an even more ancient temple that they didn't know about here. And so he turned his temple and made an L-shaped temple, which is the only L-shaped temple in all of Egypt, which is part of the proof that he didn't build this. Some people think that he faked this, but there's controversy over whether he did this or not. But this is, to me, is proof that he did not do it. Nowhere else has anyone ever made this L. He did the L so he wouldn't have to go in here and mess up that other one. And there's one thing I want to say before I go into those temples in the back. This is the inside of the Seti the First temple. And what they have discovered in Egypt in the last few years, there's writing that goes to within maybe, I don't know, from your knees all the way up to the top of this 35-foot ceiling or whatever that is up there, and even up on the pillars way at the very top. And when you go to, who's been to Egypt here? Okay, there's quite a few, about 10, 12 people. You notice that you go into these temples, and many of the figures that are on the wall, that are in either relief or whatever, however they're on there, have been chipped away or destroyed. And for a long time, they may have told you, I don't know, that it was because of the Romans and other people who had come in there had destroyed these things. They now know that's not true. They know it's not true beyond any doubt whatsoever, though they didn't know for a long time, because they've discovered in recent times that the language on the walls was placed there in such a way that there was a time frame. The language that is from about roughly about this high down was speaking of the past, and from about this high up to maybe 9 or 10 feet, or maybe even 12 feet up the walls, was the present at the time the temple was built. And the stuff that is up further is future, what they think is going to happen in the future. And they now know that who did it, because there's only one person who could have known who did it, or one group of people, and that was the priests themselves that created the temples or took care of the temples. They were the ones that went around and destroyed the writing on the walls, because only the writing that was of the present time of the temples was touched. The past and the future was not touched. And somebody just going in there, like the Romans, just to go in there and cause hell, would not have known that, or could not have picked that out so carefully to just touch the present. Now to them, what they put on those walls was, when they wrote what was going to happen in the future, that was just it. That's what was going to happen. And if you don't believe that they can't see what was going to happen in the future, you're going to see a slide at the very, very end of this I don't know how it came up on for those of you who saw the videos. You probably couldn't see it very clearly or not, but you'll see this one very clearly. There's going to be a slide at the very, very end of here. I'm going to wait till the end. I got to make it dramatic. It's more fun that way. And that slide's going to be way up high, up off one of these pillars, way up there at the very, very top. And it'll be proof that they could clearly see into the future, no doubt. But you have to wait till we get there. This is the Siren Temple, which is this one back here. And it's very, very old. You're not supposed to go down in there, but I couldn't stand it. So I dropped off this thing and ran inside and took a whole bunch of pictures before they dragged me out of there. And I just had to see in there. The writing is so simple. It's so beautiful. It's just straightforward and clear. There's no junk in the middle. The writing in Egypt and in Samaria, when it came out, was in its absolute, most sophisticated, perfect form, and then degenerated after that. Got worse. Came out in its absolute clearest form, with no evolutionary pattern before. It just came out in one day. Just one day, suddenly, this perfect writing on the walls, with nothing leading up to it. No evolution, absolutely zero, both in Samaria and in Egypt. And then got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And they never could understand that. You'll understand it in just a little bit, why it got that way. Anyway, they got me out of there, and when they did, I went over to here. And this is the one, that's the back of the first temple, and I'm standing right now here, taking a picture toward here. And this temple was also called the Siren Temple, and it was dedicated to resurrection, according to the hieroglyphics that are found in here. And there's this ramp right here, and it was over here where that flower of life pattern was found. Now, this is the building when they first excavated it, and it was dry in there now. The Nile has changed its level and is filling up with water. And they talk about these three steps, where these steps came up this way, a thing in the middle, and the steps go back down again. These three different levels, which are associated with the three levels of consciousness, the 42, the 44, and the 46, that we're going through, which are all associated with resurrection. And this temple, this was done by Lucy de Lubitz, which was Swallow de Lubitz's daughter. She reconstructed the temple from a blueprint plan, and then discovered that it was based upon the sacred geometry of two back-to-back pentagons. She wasn't exactly sure why, all she knew that it was. But in today, when we start talking about the grids, you'll discover that the grids I'm talking about, actual electromagnetic fields of energy that exist around the Earth. Primarily, these grids exist from about an average of about 60 feet in the Earth, average, to about 60 miles above the Earth. Every life form on the planet, even if there's only 2 bugs, has a grid stretching around the whole Earth. And these grids are all superimposed, stretching up for these 60 miles up, which causes like this light blue glow around the Earth. And the highest ones are the whales. And then the dolphins come after that, and then the humans. And there's 3 primary human ones. And the newest one, which was just finished in 1989, after 13,000 years of work of constructing it, is based on a stellated dodecahedron. And a stellated, though we haven't talked about these kind of things yet, this is a dodecahedron. It's 12 pentagons. And this is an icosahedron, and if you notice in here, there's another pentagon, and with five triangles in it. You can see the similarity between these two shapes. If you were to take this out of there, This is called an icosahedral cap in sacred geometry. And when you open up a icosahedral cap, it's these two back-to-back pentagons like this. And the icosahedral cap is the key to the Christ consciousness grid. Because if you take a dodecahedron and put one of these in each one of these things here, that's what the primary shape of the Christ consciousness grid is. And so it is very clever of them, from my way of thinking, to base the geometries of this on something that would eventually, that they clearly understood even back then, and were in the process even back then of building, and knowing that someday would be completed. This is the place where it was found, which was right here. And I had a little better camera than Katrina had. And you can see that there's actually two of these side by side here. And I took a shot right next to it over here. And though I know you can't see this real well, this one here is called the seed of life, which we're going to look at in just a little bit here. And there's all kinds of patterns all around here, which are all based on this geometry. I put my camera around the side like this over here. I couldn't get around here because there was water and everything in there. Just to see what was over there. And again, this is the back side. You can see this. I know you can't see these real well, probably from where you are, but these are all symbols that you'll find all over the world and in churches and everywhere. And they're all understandings or what stuff that you're going to learn about in this workshop right here was on this wall. It was almost like this was a school, that they were teaching this kind of stuff. After you go to one of these workshops and you go back there and you stand at the Silent Temple and you see all the symbols, you get this weird feeling because it's so familiar. I mean, it's just like, holy cow. I mean, it's just like, you know what's on the walls. You know what they're talking about. And it's just, and they're talking about everything. Way over there, and this is with an 80 millimeter lens, way over here, there's this image which you can barely see. That's a long ways away, actually. And that image looks like this. This is what was drawn carefully, though, over on there. And that symbol is the symbol of the first Christians in the world before Christ was ever even born, which are the Coptics, which are also Egyptian. 500 years before Christ was born, they were talking about him coming. And this was the symbol that they used for him. And here it is, etched in one of the Egyptian walls. That was another symbol for him, which was the triangle with the cross in the middle. Over here. And another symbol for him that the Coptics gave. Oh, wait a minute. This is another one that they etched in one of the Egyptian walls. And notice here is not only that symbol, but at the top, the 6 petals of the flower of life, which is the central core. You'll see both these 6 petals and sometimes the 6 petals with these 6 outer ones around it. And many times you'll see them side by side. You can go into St. Mary's. Once I climbed Mount Sinai, where Moses saw the burning bush, and the bottom of there is, I think it's St. Catherine's. That's what it is. St. Catherine's is a monastery. It's a Coptic monastery. They won't let you take any photographs. But when you go in there, you'll see the 6-petaled pattern on the wall, along right next to it with the 6-petal pattern with the 6 around it, showing that they had the understanding of the flower of life in there. And this was here's another one. They sometimes would do it like this, where they would take 4 intersecting circles surrounded by a circle, another symbol for Christ. And this was another symbol for Christ. A fish that breathes air. It just happens to have 13 scales on it. And you can check this one out as an interesting bit of information. Even today, Christ is, you'll see this symbol for Christ. You all are familiar with this one. Of the fish. And 200 years after Christ died, the Greek Orthodox Church took over the power of the Catholic Roman Church. And at that time, there were many, many changes that were made. And one of them was, prior to those 200 years, in the first 200 years before then, Christ was not known just as the fish. Specifically, he was known as the dolphin. Exactly what that connection is, I don't know. But that's for sure. And then later, it became known. But there was this fish connection. It could very well be that it was because of the timing of Pisces. Before, when Christ came in, he came in right at the beginning of Pisces. And before that time was Taurus. And they worshipped the bull. And the golden bull and all the stuff that was done on there, which was that time. And when Jesus came and became the fish in the Pisces, the bull was thrown down and was no longer the symbol that was being worshipped. So, again, this first whole day really is just, we're going to be going about all kinds of different subjects, and we're just trying to get a background of basic information so we can all communicate on. This is Flower of Life again, and I want to show you a relationship in the Flower of Life. The flower, it was called the Flower of Life because, or one of the reasons why, is, well, if you take the image of a tree, specifically a fruit tree comes up, it grows up, and it gets little flowers on it. And then the flowers become a fruit. They change from a flower into a fruit. And then inside of the fruit is the seed that contains the image of the whole tree. And so there is this cycle pattern from a tree to a flower to a fruit to a seed to a tree again that goes around, this particular kind of pattern. And they felt that sacred geometry had that same kind of nature to it. And to show that, this was the flower here. It's 19 circles in here surrounded by 2. And if you were to take out the center circle here and the 6 around the center, does everybody understand that? This one, and then there's a center of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those 6 circles around there. If you take that out like this, does everybody get that? Okay. This is called the seed of life. They felt that it was the seed. Now that was another one that was, I told you, it was on that wall right next to the other one, right next to the flower. And there's another image here that some of you are familiar with probably, which is called the tree of life. And there are 10 spheres connected by these lines. Now originally there were 12 spheres. No doubt about that, because the oldest known tree of life is not Hebrew, but is Egyptian. And they're on 3 pillars at Luxor and 3 pillars at Karnak, Egypt, with the tree of life etched right on there, only with one sphere above and one sphere below. One up there and one below, up here. And but the Jews and the Egyptians had a lot in common. They lived together for a long time. So I'm sure they were interconnected on this belief. And the Kabbalah, by the way, which is the main form that you will find this through today, which we tend to believe is Hebrew, has only been out, as my understanding, at least in present-day time, for 1,700 years. These pillars go way back thousands of years, at least almost 2,000 years before that. And now here's the thing. If you were to take the seed of life, if this is truly the seed, and this image that I was just referring to, how a tree goes to a flower, to a fruit, to a seed, and back to a tree, if that image is that kind of metaphor is contained in the geometry, then the tree would have to be contained in the seed. You understand? In there would have to be, in the seed would have to be the tree. That would have to be the source of the tree, of the Kabbalah, the tree of life. And so if it's true, then those two should superimpose geometrically. This should fit right over the top. And when you do it, you'll see that it fits just like a key, perfectly. Absolutely. Nothing left over. It's one point there, here, 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 and the 10th one is down here, exactly on the two rims. If you fit 12, the 12 one that we found on the other one, the 12 one will fit right on the flower. Where the 11th and the 12th one will fit precisely above and below, delineating where the flower is. So, you get a feel. This is just a real gentle feel of what sacred geometry is about. It's going to get a lot more hardcore, logical preciseness is going to about to enter into all of this in a little bit. These are wheels that are found on the ceilings in Egypt in tombs, in the really oldest of all the tombs. Nobody knows. No Egyptian archaeologist on the planet that I know of knows what they are. And I've talked to many of the world-famous Egyptian archaeologists, and they don't know. They don't know what they are, or why they are, or what they mean. But to me, I know where they came from. Thoth showed me how they were extracted, and what they are. And slowly over time, I'll show you. But they're proof that the Egyptians just didn't know about the pattern of the flower of life, and didn't know about all this knowledge that we're about to tell you. They're proof because in order to get to those wheels, you've got to go deep, 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 deep into the sacred geometry until you get way down in there, and then you'll find these wheels that will come out, and they're these guys. And they're the key to the harmonics of music, but they're also the key to the harmonics of the dimensional levels. And what you see here, these are always on the ceiling, up in the sky. They're surrounded by the stars. And here, though you can't see this, is a procession of people with animal heads walking in a straight line. If this was the floor, it'd be about like that. And they have these red-orange ovals over their heads, which are, according to Thoth, used to be called the egg of metamorphosis. And you'll understand why metamorphosis is involved in this at one point. And they're walking along here, and then suddenly there's a 90-degree turn. 90 degrees, and they're now walking this way, into the stars, and he's putting a sphere through the bull, which shows you how old this is, going back into the time of Taurus. And I'm going to have to leave these for a while to explain what they are, because we have a lot to lay down before this will all make sense. But these wheels they're maps. They're telling you exactly where they went, precisely where in the dimensional levels and what they were doing and where they were going. But just remember them. We'll have to wait till we get there till it makes sense. This is Leonardo's drawing. Again, this is all introduction still. It's Leonardo's drawing with a little bit of me on there. I drew this person sitting down here and some of this other stuff around there. This is going to be a very important drawing in what we're doing. Though sacred geometry, as you will see, can discuss any subject whatsoever. There is no limit on what subject it cannot discuss and describe in detail. I'm going to have blinders on as I discuss sacred geometry. I'm only interested in one thing here. The purpose of this workshop is ascension, which is consciously moving from one world to another, bringing your body with you, which is a little different than resurrection, which is dying, and then afterwards, while you pass through the bardo, to consciously pass through the great void, and then reconstruct your body in that way, which is another possibility. It's just as noble as this one, but there's just another possibility is all. And so in this one here, we are going to be concerned with ascension and the vehicle of ascension called the Merkaba. And the understanding of the Merkaba comes from the remembering of the crystalline energy field that's around the body. This field, and we've had instruments that can detect this field very carefully, will average about 55 feet in diameter, or about 27.5 feet radius around the average person. It'll be bigger if you were taller, and it'll be slightly smaller if you were less. But I'd say they would average somewhere between 50 and 60 feet total. And this is the innermost field. The innermost field, which happens to be right out here at your fingertips, is a star tetrahedral field that looks like this. And this is going to be the key. This is going to be the doorway. There are other doorways. There are other electromagnetic fields around the body that could be utilized to create different types of Merkabas. I'm not going to say this is the only way, but we're only going to give the instructions on one. This is the easiest, most simplest one of them all, and it's the closest one in. There is another little tiny one at the base of the spine. Little tiny, 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 itty bitty, 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 tiny one, which is the original 8 cells, which are in the form of a star tetrahedron, which our electron microscopes can see that they are, and which happens to be in the center of that field. We grew geometrically radially out. We did not grow lengthwise. We grew out in shells that go out. Out at 55 feet, you will find that there's a big round sphere. Just in from the side of that, you're going to find that there's a dodecahedron around that. And then and if you connect the centers of the dodecahedron together, it forms an icosahedron. And there's a nesting pattern that comes in from there all the way down to the central place at the base of your spine. There is a tube that runs from the top, which is directly over the top of your head, 1 hand length above your head, to 1 hand length below your feet down here. And there's a tube that runs through there. That tube the size will vary with each person, but if you take your thumb and your longest finger, your middle finger, and put them together, that's how big around your tube is in diameter. And it comes up into a little crystalline pattern, fits up into the apex, and it's just like a fluorescent tube running through and connects down at this point down here. It connects into other types of fields. There's also an octahedral field that's around here, and it also connects into other fields. There's what is called a cube equilibrium or a cube octahedron that is also connected through this one. But again, we're only going to be interested in this one field, these 2 interlocked tetrahedrons. And so it is this field that as I keep speaking, I'm going to keep aiming for this and aiming for this to reach the understanding of what this is really all about. And the breathing that we're going to do, instead of taking prana or breath into our mouth, we're going to stop breathing through our mouth like we do now and start breathing through the top of our head and begin to breathe up through the perineum from underneath. And just to clarify this a little bit more, for some of you who don't know what prana is, there are, in this invisible space right here, we know that there is air, and it's oxygen, nitrogen, etc. Various molecules of there. But also in that space, even if there was no air there, is another substance, if you want to call it a substance, an energy, which is called prana. And prana is everywhere. There is nowhere where it is not. If you had a big chunk of solid steel here, a block as big as this, it would be in the center of it. If you were in deep space and with absolute voidness, there's prana there. It makes no difference where you are, there's always prana, and it's all you need. It's your new science of tachyon energy, which is, and the yin machine and a lot of the over-unity generators that are now being created are simply connecting into fourth dimensional prana fields, which is everywhere. It's unlimited. There's no end to the amount of energy. Unless we live in a limited world like we do, where we don't know about it, and we're using oil and stuff like that. Energy is not a problem, and for most life forms, that's the least of their problems. And so, this is where we're going to be heading. We're going to learn to take the prana down this tube, and the prana coming up this tube, and it's going to meet. The male and female prana is going to meet. Where it meets, you can control with your mind. And where it meets, which chakra it meets in, which energy center in the body it meets in, is an ancient science, which we're just going to start just lightly touch upon here in this class. Though you guys know it. I mean, you know it all, man. You've used your Merkaba millions and millions of times. This is nothing new, though for some of you, you may not quite remember. You've got a pretty good idea that it's there, but you can't quite remember. But once you connect into it, the memories are going to come back very rapidly because you're professionals. You'll know what it is. All right. We're going to come back to this many, many times again over here in time. But this is where we're heading. Leonardo understood this very clearly. Just in case you're lost. I'm going to change subjects now. There's a couple subjects. Let's see. The first one, I'm not sure if it's the first one or the second one, but the two subjects one of them has to do with the star Sirius again. What was so important about that star? Why did so much emphasis placed on it? On the dolphins, saying they're coming from there, and calendars based on it. All the temples in Egypt were based on the heliacal rising of Sirius, so that a little tiny dot of red light would shoot through little tiny slits that would go into the middle of the buildings and land on the center of the altars for 1 second out of every year. And all this stuff, what was this big deal about this? What does it matter? I mean, we need to know why Sirius is important to us, because it is very important why we understand that. And second of all, there's obviously something going on in the world right now. At least it's obvious to a lot of people. Some people, maybe not. This is just normal, what's going on here. But this is not normal, what's happening here in 1992. This is very extraordinary. And in so many ways, you can see this. I mean, there's more people on the surface of the Earth than there's ever been, and it's about to double. We're about to go from 5.5 billion to 11 billion people here real quickly. And there's a lot of things that are doubling right now, every few years now. One of them that I like to use because it's so clear is knowledge itself, understanding. We have, there's people who have done this. If you take all the information we've learned from the beginning of, say, the Sumerian culture 6,000 years ago to the year 1950, we had so many bits of information. And it was so much, basically, that we had learned. You could put it into the computer and you could count it. And but starting in the early 1900s, and I believe that it was right around 1910, 11, 12, 13, right about in there, something started happening that was extraordinary. And we started becoming a lot more intelligent, a lot faster. And by the year 1950, only 50 years later, in a short amount of time, we had doubled or matched the amount of information that we had learned in 6,000 years. So we learned in 6,000 years, we had doubled that in 50. It's incredible. But we doubled all of that again in 20 years by 1970. And then we doubled all of that again by about 1980. These are rough dates. And then we doubled it all again by about 1985. And now it's going so fast that it's out of control. Nobody can get it in their computers even. It's coming in like this, you know. I mean, NASA is about 8 or 9 years behind being able to get what's coming in off their satellites and everything into their computers. I mean, they just physically can't get it in there until the computers change. Now, the computers are starting to catch up with our ability to receive the information. We're only just a couple more years away from this. Now, this phenomenon is going to happen here in your lifetime. Just if nothing else happens, you're going to see this one happen. For example, the 286 came out, and it was able to do something. And then 18 months later, you had the 386 came out, and which about doubled its capabilities. Then 18 months later, you had the 486 come out, and now we're just about ready to have the 586 come out, which will be here in just it's here now. They're just about ready to present it, which is incredible. And they figure that it's doubling about every 18 months. By the end of the century, 7 years from now, you'll have a PC so powerful that a little individual sitting in his room will have more capability than all the computers in the world hooked together, including all of NASA's computers, everything in the United Nations, everything in the Pentagon, and everything else all put in there. One little guy will have more power than that sitting there right now. Speed, ability, everything. And obviously, at one point here, the influx of information coming in will catch up with our ability to process the information. And what that means, we don't even know yet. One person will be able to map what's going on. For example, one person would be able to map the entire world's weather patterns inch by inch on the surface of the Earth. That kind of complexity. And so there's something just on an informational level that's obviously is happening here. And there's all kinds of other things that are changing very, very rapidly. The question is, that I want to ask is, why is that happening now, in 1992? What is it that's making this happen now? Why didn't it happen maybe 1,000 years ago, or maybe 10,000 years into the future? Or why is it happening at all? But there must be something that's triggering this, that's making this happen. What is it? And so we want to look at these two things, why it's happening now, and the star Sirius, why is that star so important? Well, here we are in this third planet, rotating out in space around this little star. At least we think we are. We're not, but we think we are. I'll tell you that later. It's an illusion. And almost everything we see out there is not happening at all like we think it's happening, not even close. And but from within the system where we are, inside of the Earth right here, it's really hard to understand, though we have finally cracked the whole process. It's very difficult to understand some of the things we're about to say. You could go too far out into space, and at which point the human mind is not capable of really understanding it. This is a quasar out in the furthest edges of our visible space, so big that a galaxy would be a pinpoint inside of it. It breaks all the laws of energy that we know. You can throw out the E equals mc squared, throw it out the window. It doesn't mean anything. It's producing way more energy than is even possible by anything we know. Notice the geometry of the disk in the middle and the 8 lines that are coming out of it, the ball. It's really interesting. This is something that we're probably more familiar with, a galaxy. This, by the way, is not part of the galaxy. This is an exploding star, a nebula, and it is probably many, many, many light years closer to Earth than this. This is enormous. This is just a pinpoint compared to that. And if you notice, there is a spiral of white stars coming out like this, and then 180 degrees away, on the opposite side of this sphere of stars, is another one going out like that. For a long time in astrology, they thought that what you saw was what you got, and that was it. And that was the whole thing. But recently, they're beginning to discover certain things. They've discovered that the space in here, this dark space in here, is somehow not the same as this dark space out here. But there's a difference about this. They don't know what you're about, what you're going to learn in this workshop. If they did, they would begin to unravel some of these things. All they know is that pragmatically, by the evidence, that it's different. They know that it's different because what they've discovered is that these stars are not just rotating out or coming out these arms like a water hose being slung around and the drops going out in spirals, and each drop appearing to move out the spirals, which is not what's happening, by the way. All these drops are moving radially out in a line. And that is true. That is what's happening. These stars are moving out like that. There is this expanding quality to it. However, there is another thing going on, and that is, and this has been discovered recently, and that is that each one of these stars orbits the whole thing. So they're not locked into these arms, but any particular star is actually moving in an orbit, going from white light into the dark area, into the white, back again, going from arm to arm to arm, in an orbit around the whole thing. Obviously, these are very, 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 very long periods of time, hundreds and hundreds of millions of years, for this to go around for any particular star to leave and go around one time. And they're finding, the reason they know that this area is different than this area up here, the black area, is that they're finding that these white light stars, that it's in here where the death process and the birth process both takes place. That is, it's inside of there is where the stars blow up, and when they blow up and become these nebulas like this, they form baby stars. Each one that blows up, approximately 200 new stars are formed out of it. And so they began to realize that there was some kind of difference in here. In a little bit, you'll see that there's really a white light arm here, another one 180, and at 90 degrees to that, there's a black light arm and another black light arm coming out like this. You'll see this later, but we have not until we get into the geometries. Well, this rotating motion that we have as we go around space as astrologers began to study this, they noticed that we had our solar system, our sun and our planets, which are moving as a unit through space, had a motion in it that isn't possible unless we were linked gravitationally with another body. In other words, like the Earth and the Moon are like, here's the Earth and here's the Moon. We tend to think that the Moon rotates around the Earth. That's not true. It's an illusion. What does happen is that there's a place approximately 1/3 of the way away from the Earth, a central point, and the Earth and the Moon rotate around that central place, forming a double helical pattern as it moves around the Sun. So if you were to look at just the Earth, it doesn't move around the Earth in smooth motion. It's corkscrewing through space like this. And the same way with our entire solar system. We're corkscrewing through space. We can't do that unless we're linked with something. And so over time they kept checking it out where it is, and they kept narrowing the space and narrowing the space and narrowing the space down and narrowing it down. And about 4 years ago or so, they narrowed it down to, or I guess maybe earlier than that even, I'm not sure when, they narrowed it down to 3 stars. And just recently, in the last 2 or 3 years or so, they narrowed it down to exactly which star it was that we are linked with. And of course, what do you think it is? Sirius A. That can't be Sirius, right? So we're brothers and sisters. We're linked. And there is a connection between Sirius A and our star that I can only describe. I'll describe in a story. But the distance in space because we are linked in this way, the distance between us is not as great as you would think. We're only 90 seconds away from each other. That's all it takes, with the proper understanding. And it is very, very easy to get from Sirius A to the solar system, or the other way around. It's very simple. And the dolphins, if you read the stories of Peter Shenstone, who knows Peter Shenstone? Nobody. Wow. Peter Shenstone is the leader of the dolphin movement in Australia, and who will very well may become president of Australia someday. It's a real good chance. He will. He's loved by almost everybody there. There's only 15 million people in Australia, and they're all kids. They're all really young. And they like Peter a lot. And their people in power are real concerned about him. And he has been channeling with the dolphins for a long time. And he channeled a 250-pound book from the dolphins. And it weighs so much because it's made of these big sheets of acetate. And it's these drawings describing the history of the dolphins and whales, which are drawn on acetate, and each chapter is about an inch thick. And the cover is just a different color. So you've got a big pile of these books with all these different colors. But when you look at the drawings in them, you see into the acetate. So it feels like, as you're moving the drawings, it feels like you're moving through water. Because you see these fuzzy things slowly coming up and getting clearer and clearer. It's really kind of neat. The whole concept is really neat. They're making a movie of it now in Australia. It's called The Legend of the Golden Dolphin. And this legend describes how they were in another galaxy, totally outside of the one we're in right now, and a long, long, long time ago had to leave. And it was the golden dolphin. When a dolphin is a baby and it's born, it has golden hair all over it. And so it was the baby dolphin that led them out. Okay. That led them out of the... let me put it over here now. That led them out of the other galaxy and into this one, because they had to leave there because of the water was freezing over where they were. And they went to Sirius A, according to the legend of this book. And they stayed there for a long time until they found the tunnel that led to here. And then they came to here, and they obviously came to this planet because it has water on it. Otherwise, they'd have been to Venus or somewhere else. But they came here, and so there is this connection between Earth and the other one. It's actually the third planet out from Series B, which is the one that they inhabit over there. So. So we see this, why there's this importance to the ancients and everything else, because it's as important to, even though that star is so far away in normal ways of thinking, we're linked, we're one with it. It's like the Earth and the Moon, we're linked together. And that's fact, that's not just somebody saying it, that's astronomy. Sorry. Now the other, this is just showing the galaxy flat, and this is the edge view of it, which looks like a flying saucer. And this is the kind of motion we're making, this little spring-like motion, as we move around from one arm to the next. If you were to look at it from the edgewise, it would just look like a spring going back and forth. It's like a sine wave curve. I know you guys aren't going to be able to see this one very well because this light is so bad. Maybe you can kind of from the front, but you guys over here can't see anything. there's a purple grid all over that thing. I know you can't see it. But this is the galaxy right here. What they've now discovered is that there's a sphere of energy around the galaxy. And that inside of that sphere, there's a disk, a little sphere in the middle, a larger sphere that goes around that, and then a lot of loose stars, but they're all inside the diameter of a very specific sphere of energy. And then outside that is another sphere, an enormous one. So you have a little sphere, a little bit bigger sphere, and another sphere. There's 3 spheres involved in it, in the construction of it. The more you study this meditation, the more you look at it on atomic and cosmic levels, you'll see the same process of the meditation itself is repeated in nature in all kinds of ways. And just remember the little sphere in the center and this big one here and this other one out here, and you're going to see those again a little later. And this is the heat envelope. This is the infrared photograph of a galaxy that's kind of coming down at us like this, kind of coming at an angle down like that. So it's got a ring around here. And you notice this black ring that goes around there, which is cooler than the other one, but it's also moving very fast. And that's the fastest moving part, so that's what's on the outer edge. If you look at someone that has a Merkaba rotating around them, you'll notice that they have a black ring out around them out at about 55 feet out, because their Merkaba is rotating at about 9/10 the speed of light. And it tends to make the outer edges of it turn black. Really, it's just like, you'll see this black ring around the person way out there. And then the colors will come in from there. But the shape of this heat envelope, which looks like a flying saucer, is precisely the dimensions and shape of the Merkaba around you when you do a particular thing with your breathing and your patterns and your thoughts and your feelings all combined in this particular way. This shape is what will come up around your body.